All right, this week we are talking about divination, and why not make it fun by bringing in the topic of damnation as well. Divination and damnation. What do they have to do with each other? So when I first started working with the tarot, it was actually under the training of a Golden Dawn adept. And the first bit of instructions that came with from the adept for tarot training was to throw away the book that comes along with the Rider-Waite tarot deck. So that little booklet that comes with the Rider-Waite, the instructions that my teacher gave immediately off the bat was to throw away the book. Don't even bother looking at it. Of course, I did look at it, but I did not read it. I did as I was told. And the reason for so when you start out with tarot, the reason you don't read the guide that comes along with it is mainly simply because the guide provides lots of one-word meanings and interpretations of what the different cards mean. And when most people get a tarot deck, they will simply learn all of the meanings and then begin to do readings based on. So if this card comes up, that's what it means. Okay. And if you know anything about Einstein's definition of insanity, it means doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get the same result. That's very similar to saying every card has one meaning, and every time that card comes up, it has one meaning. That is a type of insanity. We can go into that a little bit more in depth to explain why that is. The founder of archetypal psychology, James Hillman, was fond of saying, "Stick to the image." And he was noting that Carl Jung was a psychologist, a psychotherapist, who essentially did that. Whenever imagery would come up in dreams of his clients, he would look at the images. He wouldn't necessarily look at what they meant. Okay? And so people like James Hillman and people like me would discourage you from getting those books about the meaning of your dreams. If you see a snake in a dream, it probably means rebirth or immortality or something like that, right? If you see a lion in a dream, it's probably the devouring power of the subconscious mind, right? And that's what it means whenever it comes up. No. So what does it mean to stick to the image? When an image comes up, let's say on a tarot card, it means different things at different times. And one of the easiest ways to look at each tarot card is that each tarot card is like an entity or a scenario with entities in it. And these entities have good and bad days. They are intelligences, and when you draw a card on different days of the week, they might say different things based on what's happening with you, based on what's happening with them. It's helpful to regard these things as living entities, because then you begin to value the psyche as though it's real. You have to remember that in most of us, imagination is getting tired of being told that it's not real. And then, of course, it produces all kinds of compulsive behaviors and psychoses and psychological obsessions, because it's getting tired and annoyed by us continuously disregarding it as unreal. Okay, and so when you begin to work with tarot, the tarot deck, you can, each card is like a gateway or a doorway into a particular part of the psyche, specifically for the Western psyche. And the Rider-Waite deck tunes very much into the forces of astrology and also the forces of the agricultural worldview, which astrology is largely based upon. And the Rider-Waite deck was developed by adepts of the Golden Dawn, particularly Waite, Arthur Edward Waite, and Pamela Coleman Smith is the actual artist who did the illustrations. And so it's based on Golden Dawn principles, more or less. And I like the deck because it also has a lot of sort of exoteric Christian imagery woven into it. Okay, and as you know, or many of you know, the Golden Dawn system of magic is sort of pagan on the outside and has a Christian flavor on the inside because of in the inner order that's largely based on the redemptive force within creation, the Osiris current, or the Christ force. And so there's a sort of Christian flavor to it, and the cross, the Celtic cross, becomes very important in the inner order of the Golden Dawn. And when you work with tarot, one of the most famous spreads of tarot is the Celtic cross tarot spread. There's also the hexagram spread, the Tree of Life spread, and of course others that you've probably heard of. So when you're working with these tarot images, you want to throw away the booklet that comes with the deck, because for the Kabbalah Magic book, you're drawing a single card every day, and you're simply regarding it and wondering what just whatever comes up. You're just regarding it, and you're looking at it to see whatever might come up. Okay, and how do you do that? Well, one of the best ways to do that, like with this card, this is the High Priestess card, is to imagine it as a doorway, and then maybe you can hear, see, and smell various forces that might drift through the card at you. You can kind of get a sense for the atmosphere and the space that's beyond the portal of the card. And what this means is that you kind of, your imagination reaches into the card and sort of feels the textures inside that space. Okay, this is one of the things that comes to the rescue, by the way, if you supposedly have trouble visualizing. People will try to take visualization literally and make visuals out of everything, see everything, when visualization is much more, it's much more like imagery that you learn about in a literature class. Imagery involves all the senses. And for many of us, it's very tactile. So it has a textural quality, tactile visualization. So you can feel the various textures inside the card. You can feel that tapestry behind the High Priestess. Not only do you feel the vibrancy of the colors, and there's maybe even a sense of heat or energy, or maybe fruity smells that are coming from the pomegranates that you see behind her. You can feel the stone of the two pillars, Yakinth and Boaz, on either side of her. And in particular, you can see how interesting that robe is of hers, how it flows like water, sort of like the Lady Galadriel, power of the moon, and how the moon represents these subtle, vibratory, liquid energies. All right. And the High Priestess, when you look at her, can say a variety of things. And she can imply a variety of things with her mere glance. Okay, and these are the things you pick up on. And they resonate with you, and you notice them, and you write them down in your journal. And that's kind of how you work with these tarot cards. And for the longest time, you ignore the meanings that other people have told you that these things mean. Okay. A lot of you guys like to work with Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck, and you'll notice that many of his cards have meanings attached to them. That's unfortunate. But of course, eventually you will learn not to take any of the assigned meanings in the catalog of meanings. You'll learn not to take them so literally, and that it's not that big a deal anymore. You can see, oh yeah, this is what many people say the card means, but what's it saying to me right now, as this moment, the today, this very minute? And this is how we learn to read tarot, and then really see the forces that are coming through for ourselves. Now, divination and damnation. What does damnation have to do with divination? Well, what you'll notice is that when we have dreams at night, dreams are always, I wanted to say almost always, but they really always have an uncomfortable component to them. There's always some kind of there's slight anxiety going on, like you find yourself walking around naked in public, or you are up in front of a group of people and you don't know what to say. People are treating you unkind or turning the cold shoulder to you. There are dreams that you are falling from a great height, that something's falling on top of you, crushing you, all kinds of monsters chasing you. These are all pretty much manifestations of trauma, from evolutionary trauma. They often come from this very life, from this very generation in which you're living right now, things that you're dealing with right now. But most of them are reflections from much further in the past than that, arising from cell memory, from previous generations, inherited fears, like falling off of a great height, fear of falling. Some people even dream of snakes when they've never really seen a snake, except on TV or something like that, right? Or they dream about monsters with fangs and claws when they've never really seen a lion up close. Where do these things come from? Okay, or horned creatures, even though they've never lived on a farm, they still have images of these scary creatures arising, or dangerous forces. Like a very common sort of nightmare people have is that they're on the beach and a great tsunami comes rushing in, a wall of water comes rushing at them, or a wall of water comes rushing down the river and of course washes them away and kills them, and they wake up. And so when it comes to dream imagery, dreams arise as basically manifestations of trauma. If you've ever had PTSD and hallucinated, you can see that something from the past is becoming vividly alive right in front of your eyes. It's a powerful hallucination, let's say. It's simply that scenario coming back to you so you can relive it and make sense out of it. It's saying you haven't made peace with this yet. Something happened and you really need to make sense out of this. This is very important. And you haven't done that yet, so it's going to keep coming back to you to try to get you to make sense out of it. Okay, and this is what happens at night when we dream. These little tiny traumas come back, and they keep asking for your attention, for you to make meaning out of them, to resolve them. Okay, now these kinds of scenarios, they don't only arise while you're sleeping at night in your dreams. They arise sort of behind the scenes in your subconscious, even in the waking world. And as you get further along and get closer to adeptship, you can see them. You can sense them. It's like, oh yeah, there's that scenario. It flashed there for a moment and I could see what the scenario involved, right? And if I were dreaming at night, it would be much more vivid, obviously. And so these things are always there. They're always lurking there. And the tarot is sort of designed to plug into these things. Okay, and every time there is an image arising of a past trauma, it is always a dualistic scenario. Okay, because trauma always involves me versus something else. There's me desiring something very much so badly, must have it, and I feel so deprived because I don't have it. Or there is me being threatened by something else. I must get away from that. It's my biggest fear. Got to get away. So there's me versus it, subject versus object. And if you'll notice, all thoughts are subject-object scenarios. Okay, so if you remember from grammar class, English class, a sentence is a collection of words that comprises a complete thought, a subject, verb, and an object, or a subject, verb, and complement. And So the subject-object relationships are thoughts. So anytime you have compulsive thoughts that are arising, they also are manifestations of stress and trauma that are trying to work themselves out. Every thought you have is a stressful scenario. Now, it's possible to walk around in the world without having any thoughts. You're just experiencing and sort of automatically just participating in the environment without thinking about it. But then a thought might arise like, oh, I need to buy some bananas. It's like, oh, I desire something and I am incomplete without something. I must have this. And then that's your thought arising. And that slight discomfort of not having something you want is that slight trauma scenario that has now arisen, which now needs to be resolved. And in order to resolve it, you'll go buy some bananas and you'll eat one, maybe something like that, right? And so whenever a thought arises or whenever a scenario arises like this, if it is a stressful scenario, it's going to be a subject-object relationship. That's the way these things work, okay? And these tarot cards, they conjure up these subject-object relationships. Now, the devil is a good example of a card that indicates this a sense of being bound by these subject-object scenarios that keep arising. And as they arise, they compel you to do things. And you're kind of walking around the world as these needs and fears keep coming up. You keep responding to them and let them boss you around. Okay, these scenarios rise up and kind of pinch you and grab you and say, let's go do this, or let's fight against this, or let's run away from that, or let's go grab that. And when we are at their beck and call and we do as they say, we are bound by them. This is sort of a hell state, it's a state of damnation, where our fears and desires control us. Okay, so the devil card is a good example of, or a good representation of what it's like to be at the beck and call of these trauma scenarios that arise within us and possess us and take us over. I gave an example of this one time. Many people, when they see a snake, they get possessed by an entity that arises with them. The snake killer arises and they go kill the snake. And then when the snake is dead, they snap out of it. It's like, whoa, what came over me? It's like I have this powerful instinct that reacts with fear to anything that moves in a serpentine sort of way. Okay, so when these things can take you over and you're not really in control and you just kind of can't help it but obey their commands, you are in a state of servitude, governed by fear and desire, trapped in a world of fear and desire, which is basically hell. It's a hell state. Some people have it really bad. Some people have it in a minor way. You know, it irritates them throughout the day. And this is what we call an enlightenment. Now, it's possible as these scenarios arise to address them and say, I don't need to do that. As they arise, you can become aware of them. And see, the tarot basically is plugging into these dualistic relationships, these subject-object relationships that have stressful relationships between the subject and the object. The stress being the subject says, I must have this, I'm incomplete without it. That's stressful, right? Or the subject says, I'm afraid of this, I must get away with it. Okay, when the subject is afraid of the object, it's a stressful situation. When the subject desires the object, it is a stressful situation. Okay, and it's possible to be free of that, to simply not have any thoughts at all. And yet still there's mental activity, there's images being processed, but there's no sense of inadequacy or threat at all. Gone. And that's what it means to be free of the devil card. Now, all these tarot cards have subtle or very pronounced dualities within them, of course. And here we have the Two of Cups, which represents, many people will say it represents desire, but it can represent all kinds of things. Timidity, maybe, tenderness, the beginnings of tenderness, the beginnings of the expression of love, the impetus to love, the impetus to desire. And you notice how the man there is reaching for the woman. That's the initiation of some kind of desire, impulse. This is a very obvious example of a stressful scenario of desire, timidly tenderly wishing to be fulfilled. And of course, it's a bit of a monster between them, isn't it? And of course, we have other types of duality where being kicked out into the cold, rejected by the people inside, let's say, living in a state of poverty where the people inside are nice and warm and cozy, right? So the fear of being rejected by the community is very powerful, especially for people who suffer from the fear of public speaking. It's primarily a fear of being rejected by the community, which used to be for us a death sentence. If we're rejected by the tribe, it's very difficult to survive in the wilderness on your own. You kind of need that community. And so that dualistic relationship exists between self and community. Fear of being rejected. But of course, this card can represent more than just that. Depends on what's happening with you, how it comes up, what you notice each time. Each time you draw it, it's going to say something possibly different. And the definition given to it in the little booklet that comes with the tarot deck will no longer be adequate. Thank God. Now, eventually, you can start looking at what other people say the cards mean, and that's fine. But it's best to develop your own interpretations first, and then really see how. What you'll notice is that your interpretations run much deeper than the superficial interpretations of the catalog, what the catalog says. Okay, so what you notice is that all of these scenarios, they arise and they compel you to go do things, go chase after this, go run away from that. These are all sort of hellscape scenarios, little nightmares. And as you deal with each of these scenarios as they arise in the tarot, that triggers one of those things. And then you can actually, feel what's going on with the energies of the card, but then you can even close your eyes and say, and then the scenery will change to something that is pertinent to you right now. Okay, and then of course, working with the cards through various spreads becomes much more intricate and interesting because you have all of these different types of stress scenarios coming together to produce what appears to be a life situation. Okay, there's much more to say about tarot, but I wanted to really talk about how it's primarily a tool for processing trauma. And so the more you become aware of these stress scenarios that are presented by the cards, the more you are able to confront them and make peace with them and to make meaning out of them and to make friends with them. So you recognize these scenarios and these energies as they come up. And rather than say, oh my God, there it is, you think, oh, there you are again. Yes, life can be frustrating because of this dualistic relationship and that dualistic relationship. And eventually you learn to see through all these things because none of these dualistic relationships are necessarily real. They have arisen to compel you to do something that has something to do with survival, like finding a mate and procreating, or reaching for food and eating, or running away from a predator. These are not necessarily things that anyone ever has to do, but they are things that have been programmed into us that that are now causing us to be reactive and to suffer and to react inappropriately when we don't need to because we're being triggered. All these triggers can be noticed and let go of. Okay, or made friends with, because if there's a bus speeding towards you, naturally you're going to jump out of the way. It's only normal. Okay, but if you have the trauma really bad, just looking at a bus that's not moving can make you freak out, and that kind of subject-object relationship stress scenario needs to be resolved. Okay, and the more we resolve these things, the more free we become, the less damned we become. And we free ourselves from being bound by all of these fear scenarios and desire scenarios. The ultimate goal of the tarot then is to be free. Probably the best representation of that would be the universe card of the tarot. Everything's resolved now, and everything's just the universe, just as it is. Some people would say the star card also represents that too. But probably the universe would be a better representation of that. All right, so I hope that helps. That's something, a little bit of tarot advice for this week. So until next time.